Hello. So I came outside today and wanted to make a video about a topic that's very dear to my heart, and it's wrongful imprisonment. So I'll just tell you a little history. Is that when I was young, I went to the library, and I wasn't the best reader. My friends were much better readers than I, so I had to find a topic that I enjoyed, and I picked this one book that was a very nondescript book. There was nothing on the covers in those days, and I began reading the book. It was about a young boy who was walking with a little girl on the army base, and the next day the girl that he was walking with was found dead, and one thing led to another. They assumed the boy had something to do with it, and they charged him with murder. And this was in the 60s. And I read the book and I was fascinated, and the minute I was finished, I was convinced that he was innocent by reading the facts of the case. And I began trying to tell everyone around me that this guy was innocent and somebody needs to do something. Nobody seemed interested to listen to what I had to say, and I was very frustrated. Well, it turns out that 20 years later, a reporter for CBC's Fifth Estate did a story on it, and he was eventually let out of prison, and his name was Stephen Truscott. Well, I knew after reading that book that I had found the subject that interested me, and I wanted to learn more about it. The next book I read was a boxer, and the book was called The 16th Round. And again, when I finished reading it, I was convinced this guy was innocent, and I thought somebody should do something about it. Well, years later, they would make a movie, and somebody did something about it. Out in Nova Scotia, I believe the guy was. And it was about Reuben Hurricane Carter. The gentleman who did something about it, as you'll see in the movie called Hurricane, he read the book as well, and he thought somebody should do something. Well, he did something, and one thing led to another, and a group in Toronto that was looking after this boy. He was originally from New York, I believe, but they sort of adopted him to help his education, and they managed to get him out, but it was no easy feat. And I love the theme song for that movie, Hurricane, by Bob Dylan, and that prompted me into a lifelong obsession with Bob Dylan's song, because I think he's our greatest guitarist, at least. So what would follow would be a procession of books that I began reading about people who were wrongfully imprisoned. I can just mention Guy Paul Morin. The book was called Red Rum, Murder Spelled Backwards. And then there was a whole bunch of others. David Milgaard, Glenn Ossoon, Sofino, Marshall, Driscoll, Filion in the U.S., and Leonard Peltier. And then in the U.S., there's Ricky Jackson and Mumia Abu Jamal. That one's very controversial, but I'll put some links in. You can read about him. As far as the UK, there's Daniel Morgan. I just happened to listen to a podcast about this gentleman, and he was, I'll put a link in. That story is very controversial as well. He came upon some corrupt policemen, and you can deduce for yourself what you think happened to him. And then when I was in China, when I would do a discussion about the death penalty, I would tell them that years ago we had the death penalty in Canada as well, but we abolished it because I can put the link in for the story, but because we realized we made a mistake about people we had arrested. So we decided we're not going to do that anymore, and we abolished the death penalty, which is something I wish they would do in China. But it's hard. You see the people, they're very fervently believe in the death penalty. But when I point out to them the case of why we abolished it in Canada, they sort of do a double take. They're still not totally convinced. Then I point out that the same thing happened in China, where a boy about 16, 17 was convicted of killing somebody, but it turns out it wasn't him, it was the policeman. But it's too late for the boy because he's already dead. So I hope that the whole world gets rid of the death penalty, but that's a separate issue. As for some movies about this topic, there's 12 Angry Men, which I love, with Henry Fonda. There's one that just came out, Just Mercy. All these are, of course, true stories. There's the West Memphis 3 case, which in the movie was called Devil's Knot. And it goes on and on. Conviction, Brian Banks. Now, as for why I'm doing this one, something just came out on Netflix. It's called The Innocence Files, and it's by there's 9 episodes, 1 hour each. It's by the Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, the Innocence Project. So they do great work, and they decided to make a few cases. There's also a podcast. There's also a podcast that I listen to that it's called Wrongful Conviction with Jason Flum. And one of the cases was a gentleman called Alfred Dwayne Brown, and he in it talks about the Innocence File. So that's where I started watching that. Now I'll just tell you, when I did start doing more research, I realized that the reality is more like my cousin Vinny than Perry Mason. There is so much flawed with the courtroom reality that it's just sad. And so one day when the law clerk was holding I don't know, it was called a Justice Day or something, where they had they had judges and lawyers and you could talk to them all. So I went down to listen, and I was very anxious to ask the judge about this, about so many innocent people who were convicted. And the judge he kind of dismissed my question. He didn't really seem to care. He's just like, he's getting paid and he's doing his thing. He doesn't really care. But I can't believe that so many innocent people are convicted and no one cares. We should all be outraged, because if it happened to you, you would want someone to care with the passion that I have about this. But it's sad that the judges don't really care. There's a procedure and they just follow their procedure. And boy, if you've ever been in the government, you know that there's very little you can do about the procedure once it's etched in stone. So I'm going to put links onto all these things, and I hope you'll go in and do some research and learn more about this. It is really sad that there are so many innocent people in prison or have been convicted for crimes they did not do. And the only thing that's more sad than that is that the rest of us don't care enough to do anything about it. So I hope that I inspired someone to do something about it, do some research, maybe don't just watch the movies, but then beyond that, go and do something about it. If we all do something about it, we can change it. But if we do nothing, nothing will change. Okay, so that's it for now. Bye-bye.